Hey folks, this video is a review of the key points from Chapter 1 in Action Research in EDU 300. And I'm also going to add a few points that were not made in this text to give you some background and help you build some capacity for what action research might look like for you. First of all, I want to define empirical research. So empirical research is based on the scientific method. Imperial itself means information gained by experience, observation, and or experimental. It's based on evidence. So empirical, empirical data are produced by experience and or observation, and it can be quantitative or qualitative. So let me kind of just repeat that a little bit or sum it up a little bit. Empirical research is based on gaining information by experience, observation, or experiment. It's based on evidence rather than anecdote. And that's the key here, is that it's research-based means it's based on evidence. And the evidence can be collected in a number of ways. So I hope that sort of clarifies when we talk about empirical research what that means. So you think of empirical research as based on evidence. Anecdotal information is based on one's personal experience or story, and then conceptual research is based on concepts that somebody may posit and then elaborate on those concepts, but it's not based on evidence. So that should help us as we move forward. Excuse me. So just an overview. The goal of traditional educational research is to explain, predict, and or control education phenomena. This is the traditional way of looking at research. Positivism is the belief that natural phenomena can be explained in an orderly fashion. So we put these two together and we get where that scientific method comes in, that we can explain, predict, and control, and that it can be explained in an orderly way. Quantitative research focuses on controlling a small number of variables to determine cause-effect relations and our strength of those relationships. Quantitative research uses numbers. It's as simple as that, statistical data, all right? Qualitative research uses narrative, descriptive approaches to data collection to understand the way things are and what the research means from the perspectives of the participants in the study. This is a much more up-close and personal way of researching than quantitative research. Quantitative research generally is collection of numbers through surveys and so forth and so on. And it's a very detached kind of research. Those numbers are brought in and they're cooked and mixed and put through statistical analysis, and then results come up with that. Qualitative research is a little more messy. I'm going to talk more about what constitutes qualitative research in another conversation. But there are also studies that combine these two. So quantitative and qualitative methods together are called mixed methods. The research question that a researcher forms will determine the most appropriate approach. Okay, so those are sort of key ideas from that aspect of the reading. What I want to add to this a little bit is that the theories of ontology, and ontology, O-N-T-O-L-O-G-Y, and epistemology, E-P-I-S-T-E-M-O-L-O-G-Y. The theories of ontology and epistemology really influence the researcher. Okay, these are, and you need to understand these as essential to understanding the forms of knowledge that are produced through qualitative research. So just a little thumbnail sketch of what ontology and epistemology is, and you may already know this, but I'll just put it out there. So ontology is a branch of metaphysics or philosophy that's concerned with the overall nature of what things are. There's concern with identifying in the most general terms the kinds of things that actually exist. So in other words, answering the question, what is existence and what is the nature of existence? Okay. What is the nature of the universe? Is there a God? What happens to us when we die? What principles given the properties of matter? These are all ontological questions. It's questioning the overall nature of things. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature of knowledge itself. its possibilities, scope, general basis. So more broadly, one would say, how do we go about knowing things, or how do we separate true ideas from false ideas? How do we know what is true? How can we be confident when we have located truth? Or is there truth? What are the systematic ways we can determine when something is good or bad? So ontology is about what is true, and epistemology is about the methods of figuring out these truths. So you need to really think about your own stances here, about what your beliefs in ontology, how do you know what you know? How do you know that you exist? What is the nature of existence? And then how do you go about figuring out these truths? Okay, this is kind of heady stuff, and it's not something that you have to wrap your head around, this instant. But it will help you to, if you think about, your stance on your epistemology and your stance on ontology, that'll really influence the kinds of research that you do and the ways in which you go about doing it. Okay, so just to review, ontology is the study of being, of becoming, of reality. And epistemology is the study of knowledge and belief. Okay, what's knowledge? How can we get it? And so forth and so on. So keep those things in the background, and think about those. I think it'll become clearer as we kind of work through the different kinds of qualitative research that will help you to really think about that. And it also will help you to examine your own ideas about that. So, action research. So this course is looking at action research. And so here it is defined. It refers to a wide variety. Remember this, wide variety, and we're going to come back to wide variety in another PowerPoint. We're going to look at these, the different kinds of evaluative, investigative, and analytical research methods. Okay, so a wide variety designed to diagnose problems or weaknesses, whether organizational, academic, or instructional, and to help educators develop practical solutions to address them quickly and efficiently. So while your text situates action research within a practicing teacher's purview, there are many situations, events, or discourses, texts, and more that you as pre-service teachers and students can investigate. So as you read the text, don't get stuck in that I have to be in a classroom to do this kind of work, because that's not true. We're helping you to learn to do this work now as a pre-service teacher, so that when you do become a practicing teacher, you will know how to conduct action research in your own classroom to help you become a more effective teacher. So it's also going to depend on what interests you. Okay, so what resources are available to you and what permissions that you need to take into consideration. So be thinking about a question, an idea, a focus that you might like to focus on, because you are going to have to conduct some research and write a report. So now is the time to start thinking about that. If you are working in a school, you may be able to conduct your research there. We can talk about how that might look. If you're not working in a school, maybe you want to investigate your own college classrooms, or you may want to investigate a text or a document. We'll talk a lot more next week about how that might play out and how you might use that in your own research. So action research can also be applied to programs or educational techniques that are not necessarily experiencing problems, but you just want to know more about it and improve it. So it's not always about a problem or a weakness. It can be looking into something that's working quite well and finding out why it's working so well. Okay, so process. And I expanded a little bit on what your book gave you. So you're going to first identify an area of focus, a research question, and a theoretical stance. Okay, so, and next week we're going to look at this more closely. I'm going to ask you to come up with something next week, but I want you to be thinking about it now. All right, the theoretical stance, don't worry about that right the second. I've got another lecture I'm going to do on theoretical stances, so that can also help you be reflective about where you might stand. You may not know where you stand, theoretically, or what frame you want to look at your research through. So I'm going to kind of flesh those out a little bit for you, so you can be thinking about the theoretical stance that you want to take, or you feel that's best for you. An area of focus. and then forming a research question around that. So this is the very first step of the research process, and we're going to begin it here with a thinking assignment, okay? And then next week we're going to have a more substantive assignment of coming up with that area of focus in the research question and the theoretical stance, okay? The second step then is to then review the literature, okay? Now a lot of you may have conducted research by going to the library or using online databases and collecting information, synthesizing it and writing it up, and called it a research report. And it is in a way, but that's really a literature review, okay? You're not conducting research, you're looking at the literature. So that aspect will be part of your research project. It's not going to be, have to be real extensive, but you are going to have to, once you've identified your area of focus, go to the literature, to the scholarship, and see what's already been said. And then, you're going to summarize that in your literature review. Then you're going to collect data, okay? And the ways in which you collect data are going to vary, and depending on what you decide you want to do in the research question and the theoretical stance. The possibilities could view an interview study, it could be an observation, it could be looking at documents or texts. It could focus on a single person, it could focus on a single event, it could focus on a group of people, it could focus on a class, it could focus on a lot of different things. So you just sort of need to think about, what's going to constitute the data and how am I going to collect it. We're going to talk about that, later on. I'm just going through the process now. And as you think about your area of focus in your research question and the collection of data and participants, how many participants you have, what's the size of the sample you're going to use the Goldilocks principle, folks, okay, which means it's not too big, it's not too small, but it's just right. Given that you have 15 weeks to complete this, okay, so this is not going to be, a full-blown, huge empirical research project that often takes months or years to do. It's going to be a very small snapshot of a very subset of a focus, okay? So once you've collected data, and again, we'll identify how you want to collect the data, and it won't be the same for everybody, then you're going to analyze and interpret that data, okay? And you say, well, how do I do that? Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how you will look for patterns and how you will look for predominant thoughts and ideas and words, and then how you would interpret that, okay? And then you're going to produce a rich descriptive report that includes an action plan, all right? So in other words, you're going to have this whole report that's going to have an introduction that introduces your research question, your theoretical stance. You're going to have a section for your literature review. You're going to have a section called methodology where you tell your audience, how you collected the data and what you used to collect the data. And then you're going to have a section of analysis, interpretation, and then a final section that's going to give the action plan. What are the implications of this research? What are your recommendations? Okay. Okay, so that's the process. Pretty simple, I think. Once we sort of get our heads wrapped around it and we start digging into the work, I think you're going to find it really enjoyable. Other than that, I think that's about it for chapter 1. I'm not going to go over the parts of chapter 3 you read. I think it's pretty straightforward. I just want you to sort of get and this chapter 3 gives you some help in looking at what you want for your area of focus. And we're going to use chapter 3 next week, when I ask you to be, really come up with that plan. But for this week, review it and think about it. Look at those reflective pieces in chapter 3 that it asks you to do as you start looking at an area of focus. But next week, we'll do the heavy lifting and the work of coming up with that topic. So that's it, folks. And I will be back in another little item on your Blackboard site to give you a more lengthy description of qualitative research.